Back on CBS Sports HQ Spotlight, it is Mock Draft Monday. A week ago right now, the Mavs had a 1.8% chance to get the top pick. Well, now they are 5 weeks away from getting Cooper Flagg. 37 days until the NBA draft, June 25th and 26th in Brooklyn. Fitting that it's in Brooklyn at Barclays, considering the Nets have the most first-round picks. They have 4 first-round picks. I'm Chris Hassel, joined by Adam Finkelstein and Kyle Boone following last week's lottery and draft combine in Chicago. Both of you guys were there for that, so a lot of shuffling in the deck, players moving up and moving down. And Kyle, you have a first-round mock for us that starts with Dallas getting Cooper Flagg. What is he going to do for the Mavs in year one?
Well, first of all, he provides some hope for a Dallas franchise that I think probably lost a lot of hope. You know, they traded away Luka Doncic to the Los Angeles Lakers, and Cooper Flagg, I think, is someone you can build a franchise around. He's a foundational prospect, you know, great size. He's a good scorer. He's a good passer. He led Duke on a 35-win team in points per game and assists and rebounds and blocks and steals. He does everything, and there's not a lot of holes in his game. There is going to be a lot of optimism around Dallas and the future because of what he brings on both ends of the floor. He's a game-changing defensive prospect with no holes on his offensive side of the floor. So, you know, I think the easy pick for Dallas Mavericks, taking number 1, Cooper Flagg.
Kyle has a new mock at CBSSports.com that you can find. We are going to be focusing mostly on Adam's first-round mock, although the top 5 are pretty much, I believe, exactly the same. Fink, you have a player comp for Cooper Flagg, maybe a couple. What do you think?
Yeah, I went into the season talking about Andrei Kirilenko because of the defensive prowess, the ability to patrol the lane from off the ball and then be versatile on the ball. But offensively, his ceiling has eclipsed that. So I'm throwing in some Scottie Pippen, too. And I went with Pippen is because aside from the Larry Bird comparisons just being far too lazy, Pippen was a two-way player who could really impact both ends of the floor. For the vast majority of his career, he was the Robin to somebody else's Batman. Now, obviously, that Batman was arguably the greatest player of all time. We could have that conversation another day. But Cooper Flagg, I think the one thing we don't know is whether or not he is an alpha scorer on an NBA championship caliber team. So that's why I do think the Scottie Pippen comparisons do have some legitimacy from that standpoint.
Okay, the San Antonio Spurs have the second pick, and this is one where it could go one of two ways, maybe both Rutgers players. Dylan Harper is the pick here, but Fink, why do you think that they might also take a really good look at Ace Bailey?
Well, I think they could take a look at a few different guys. If I'm them, I think Ace Bailey fits much better with their current roster. Now, listen, you don't draft based on fit with the number 2 overall pick, but I do think there's a case to be made that Ace Bailey has as high of an upside as any player in this draft, and I do not say that lightly. This guy is 6'9". He's a high-level athlete, and he is an elite shot maker. To me, there are some very legitimate Michael Porter comparisons. You know, we threw out Brady a little bit in high school, and trust me, if you saw those games, which weren't that unlike the 39 points you might have seen him drop this year at Rutgers, you would have been going Tracy McGrady too. I think Michael Porter is a little bit more realistic, and again, I just don't think people are valuing his ceiling high enough. When you talk about that athleticism, the shot making, and the wing size, that overlap is very rare in the modern NBA.
Yeah, I think if I'm the San Antonio Spurs, Chris, I'm just going to stick and pick Dylan Harper from Rutgers. I think he's the clear number 2 prospect in this class. I think Ace Bailey down the line, maybe a better fit, but I don't think he's the better talent. And I think when you start to value fit, that's how you end up drafting, you know, a Marvin Bagley over a Luka Doncic. I think the San Antonio Spurs are a smart organization. They'll evaluate their options here. Wouldn't be surprised if maybe shop the market and see what they could get. This is a really valuable pick in this draft. Dylan Harper would be the number 1 pick in a lot of classes. So, you know, I think obviously the fit with Stephon Castle, De'Aaron Fox in San Antonio with Dylan Harper, you know, there's a little bit of overlap, but certainly I think the teardrop from Dylan Harper to whoever the next prospect in this class is so significant. If I'm the San Antonio Spurs, I'm sticking and picking with Dylan Harper.
And the drop would be to Ace Bailey at 3 then, according to Kyle. I'm not sure that Fink, you think that there's that much of a drop there, but how do you see Bailey fitting in Philadelphia?
Well, Philly's in win now mode, so it's a little bit of a complicated process, but I do think he gives them a long-term asset that they can build around if they decide they have to move off the current iteration of this lineup. Paul George is now in his mid-30s. Joel Embiid just hasn't been able to get healthy. There's even more speculation about his long-term health as of late. So Ace Bailey, it remains to be seen how much he can help them pursue their championship aspirations next year. But those aspirations are contingent upon those guys being healthy. If they are not healthy and this starts to be about the future, then Ace Bailey becomes a very important long-term asset for them to join with guys like Jared McCain and Tyrese Maxey.
Some really hard luck teams that thought they had a chance at the number 1 or number 2 or number 3 picks. They didn't get it, like the Charlotte Hornets. But Fink, you say that this could be a seamless pick, and maybe this isn't too bad of a fit at number 4. Who do you have him taking?
No, I think it would be an ideal pick. LaMelo Ball is a supreme offensive talent. He is as skilled with the basketball in his hands as any player, but he doesn't guard anybody. And VJ Edgecombe is a supreme athlete with a very high defensive upside who's got to continue to work on his skill levels. So it is very much a seamless fit, I believe. VJ would bring a level of competitiveness that franchise really, really needs, not to mention the rim pressure alongside Ball and, of course, Brandon Miller. For comp purposes, I think fans should think a little bit of Victor Oladipo, an extreme athlete, two-way player who attacks the rim, has a ton of defensive upside, and is working on his guard skills. That would be the comp for me for Edgecombe, and I think this would be a no-brainer for Charlotte if Edgecombe is available at 4.
Yeah, and I love that comp, Fink, for VJ Edgecombe. Oladipo, one of the most explosive athletes we've seen come out of college, here over the last decade or so. And Edgecombe is exactly that. He's an explosive athlete, long frame, shoot 34% on threes last season at Baylor as a true freshman. I think he'd fit nicely next to LaMelo Ball. I think he'd fit really nicely next to Brandon Miller. And more importantly, I think he's a winning player. He's someone who can plug in because of his athleticism. I think you can project with confidence. His defense, I think his skill set on offense would be very complimentary to LaMelo and to Brandon Miller. So, long term, I really like VJ Edgecombe. I think he could end up going higher than this on draft night, so this could end up being a steal for the Charlotte Hornets at number 4.
All right, moving down to number 5, a team that was really hoping for a top pick, the Utah Jazz, but it's the 3rd straight year, Adam, that the team with the worst record in the NBA is picking 5th. Who do you have the Jazz taking here?
I think they could go with Trey Johnson. Trey Johnson has played his way up draft boards throughout his freshman season at Texas, and he's continued to do it in the pre-draft camp. I mean, he looked fantastic last week shooting the ball at the combine, and that's no surprise given the metrics he put up this year in his freshman season. This is a big scoring guard. He's got NBA caliber size at the 2, and he is an elite shot maker. Someone who can step right in and provide instant offense. I like him next to Isaiah Collier, who was last year's first-round pick. Now, if they go with Johnson, they'd have to move off some of their former picks and see how that evolves. But I think Trey Johnson, Isaiah Collier give them a nice tandem to build around long-term in the backcourt. And for comp purposes, I think fans should think about someone like Cam Thomas, an instant offense type of shot maker who can make shots in bunches once he gets hot.
Yeah, Trey Johnson, one of the most prolific scorers in this class. Obviously, the Utah Jazz would have liked to have a number 1 pick. They'd like to have Cooper Flagg, but Trey Johnson, led all Division I freshmen in scoring last season, better than Cooper Flagg, better than Dylan Harper or Ace Bailey, averaged 19.9 points per game, made more three-pointers than any freshman in college basketball last season, double the assist rate of Ace Bailey. I think he's a really good playmaker in that part of his game in particular, a little bit underrated. So Trey Johnson, someone who's really progressed over the last year with just his versatility on offense. I think this would be a great pick for the Utah Jazz.
Comparing both of your mock drafts at CBSSports.com, it's the same 1 through 5, but here at 6 with the Washington Wizards is where you guys start differing a little bit. Fink, who are you going with?
Well, I'm going to make a little bit of a need-based pick here, and that's with Kasparas Giacochonis. Now, this is ironic because I think, Boone, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been higher on him most of the year than I've been. If
Correct.
You like AJ, what you like about him is the shooting potential, the positional size at the point, and the feel. If you are a skeptic, you cite the shooting numbers, which were not very good, and the high turnover rate, which again is counterintuitive for someone who you're saying the feel is the best part about him. So he's a little bit of a polarizing prospect. Washington needs a point guard here. They've built a young core. They've got assets at almost every other position on the court. They would have loved Dylan Harper. Without him, if they pick for need, I think this makes a lot of sense. If they take the best available talent, I think they'll go in a different direction.
Yeah, and I think you could easily make a case for Kasparas Giacochonis, which you did here. I think Con Knipple would be in the mix. Derek Queen would make some sense. You know, Knipple's a guy who's a really good shooter. I think he's got some playmaking upside. With Giacochonis, right, he's a lead guard. He's got great feel as a passer. Really owned that Illinois offense last season under Brad Underwood. One of the most fun offenses in college basketball. Has some work to do with his game, particularly as a shooter. But I think a really promising connective piece that Washington could build around. Giacochonis would make a lot of sense here with that young core with the Wizards.
All right, we've reached number 7. It's the New Orleans Pelicans, and Kyle in his latest mock says that this is where the draft could kind of take a turn, Adam, because the Pelicans have so many questions and now a brand new GM in Joe Dumars.
Yeah, so many questions. I actually think 6 is the first major domino, but we're right in this field here where this is where it's going to get wild, right? This is where I have Con. I think Con's range is anywhere from 3 to 8. I think if he's still on the board at 7, New Orleans should definitely grab him. He's number 6 on my big board. I just love the skill. I love the feel for the game. I love the ability to be switchable onto bigger players. Listen, he is not the 6'8" that Duke listed him at. We knew that all season long. He's about 6'6". He doesn't have particularly great length or athleticism, but what he has is strength, skill, and a terrific mind for the game. He's also got the ability to come in and play with other good players seamlessly, and that is a really underrated asset. A lot of these guys know how to put up numbers when they are the focal point, but when they have to be a complementary piece, it's going to be too big of an initial adjustment. Con Knipple can do that right away, which is why I think he is going to be one of the more immediate impact rookies in the NBA next season.
No team has multiple top 10 picks, but the Brooklyn Nets, starting at number 8, have 4 picks over the next 20. 4 first-round picks, and this draft is in Brooklyn. Who do you have them taking with their first of 4, Adam?
I'm going to go Derek Queen here. Again, he is someone who could be off the board. I think Washington will take a long look at the local product at number 6, but if he is on the board, you're talking about a playmaking big with absolutely exceptional hands. He's a phenomenal dribbler for his size, which means he can play make out of the high post. You can pick and pop and put him into dribble handoff actions. He can short roll. He can do all sorts of things within the offensive playbook. He's got really good touch, and I've been saying for months, if the shooting ever comes around, it's going to unlock a new level of upside. Now, I will add to this, Chris, that I saw a little bit of a kink in that shooting release last week that reminded me of something I saw in high school, and that was a cause for concern for me. It's almost like a golfer who's got, I don't know what you call that, the yips or something, but just when the swing, just something is off with it. He's doing something funky with his wrist. He did it in high school, and it's cause for concern. It'll be interesting to see if that's something that comes up in the next 5 weeks in the pre-draft process.
And Fink, that is something that, in talking with people in Chicago, that is something that they mentioned, seeing Derek Queen with a little bit of a hitch in his shot. I think people have seen the cautionary tales of, Markelle Fultz or Ben Simmons, guys who, have lost their confidence in their shot and tried to change things. So something to keep an eye on there with Derek Queen, but a good instinctive big with great passing instincts. Brooklyn, as you mentioned, Chris, 4 first-round picks in this draft. Derek Queen, a very beloved player. He's a very affable player, someone who really gets along with people well. I think Brooklyn will be trying to set a culture with this draft class. I think Queen could not only be a good talent fit, but also could help set the culture for what they're building long-term in Brooklyn as well.
First of 4 picks, they also have 19, 26, and 27 due to the Brooklyn Nets. But starting things off at number 8 with Derek Queen, as we look at a top 8 here that is likely going to look like that 1 through 3 and maybe even 1 through 5, though Kyle thinks Ace Bailey could potentially go number 2 along with Fink. Those guys still have Harper there in both of theirs, but they think there's a chance Bailey can jump up there as well. But when does the first center go off the board? How about the tournament's most outstanding player, Walter Clayton Jr.? I have a lot more to get to, including the second lottery pick for the San Antonio Spurs. We are going through Adam Finkelstein's latest first-round mock here on HQ Spotlight. I'm Chris Hassel. Kyle Boone is with us as well. And Kyle at number 9. Fink has the Raptors taking Cam Malawak out of Duke. 7'6" wingspan at the combine. Is that right? Wow.
It's real. It's real and it's spectacular. 7'2" big man with a 7'6" wingspan. And Toronto, has kind of valued prospects who have great measurables over the last couple of years. And Malawak obviously checks a ton of boxes there. I talked to Malawak at the NBA Draft Combine about, the teams that he's talking to and what teams are hoping to get from him. And basically his selling point is length, length, length. He shrinks the floor in a way that just because of his size, it makes teams really struggle to score against him. He has great energy. He has great enthusiasm. Still very raw prospect. I think that's something worth monitoring here. But he's very impactful at Duke last season for a Duke team that finished top 5 in defensive efficiency, won 35 games. I think his game will translate at a really high level. Picked up the game at 13 years old, so still just kind of scratching the surface of what he can be as a basketball player.
A lot of these guys young, they're one-and-dones, all freshmen one-and-dones from college so far. At number 10, it's the Houston Rockets, and it's Carter Bryant is the pick here. And Adam, you referenced it in your article, only averaged 6 points and 4 rebounds a game. So how can a guy that only did that in college be a top 10 pick?
Well, it's just because I'm searching for social media hate, and I've been calling him a lot of weeks, and I've gotten hate because, as you said, 6 points and 4 rebounds. So everybody's saying, what the heck are you talking about? But here's what I would tell you. Houston, they are going to pick a defensive-oriented prospect. Carter Bryant, one of the most versatile defenders in the entire country. He's 6'7", and he guarded point guards at times this year for Arizona. He's also a high-level athlete, and he shot 45% on unguarded catch-and-shoot threes this year. So if you're looking for a 3-and-D archetype, which I think Houston very well possibly could, remember, this is a team with more young assets than arguably anybody in the NBA. Carter Bryant is going to make a lot of sense. So let the social media hate continue. I'm still going with Carter Bryant in the lottery.
All right, we're going to kind of ping pong back and forth on Finkelstein's mock here and go to the Blazers at 11. Kyle, he's taking Jeremiah Fears out of Oklahoma, and this is a guy that I think both of you agree is a project, but you actually had him going even higher than this.
Yeah, let's just continue the social media hate here for Fink. This is way too low for Jeremiah Fears. Going at number 11, I think this would be a great value for the Portland Trail Blazers. I think he could go inside the top 5 of this draft. There's some questions about his shot. He shot 28.4% on threes last season as a true freshman at Oklahoma, but very productive. He actually reclassified, one of the younger prospects in this class. Very electric with the ball in his hands, can create paint touches. I think if you're talking yourself into someone who has a high floor and a high ceiling in this class, Jeremiah Fears has star potential. I think at number 11, this would be a fantastic value for the Portland Trail Blazers.
You're also higher on the next guy on this list, to the Chicago Bulls at 12, Colin Murray Boyles. You have him 7th earlier on in this draft. Adam, this is a guy, I think the first one, right, that isn't a one and done. 2 and done at South Carolina.
2 and done, and he is a guy who has exceeded expectations from the very beginning. Reason being is that his archetype is not one that typically translates to the NBA. He's a 6'7" interior player who doesn't stretch the floor. So the question is undoubtedly, well, how does he make it in the NBA? Well, here's how he does it. He is very, very long. He's very physical. He's very strong. And he is very smart. His instincts for the game are off the charts. So he is someone that can probably be the exception to the rule about thriving as an undersized, non-shooting big. A lot of people, myself included, really believe in him if the fit is right. And in Chicago, where they have front court players who can already stretch the floor like Modest Buzelis and Jalen Smith, I think there's a nice role for him to step into from day one.
All right, our first sophomore there. How about our first senior here at 13 with the Atlanta Hawks, Kyle? Adam has him taking Walter Clayton Jr., the tournament's most outstanding player from Florida.
Yeah, just a versatile scorer in Walter Clayton Jr., who had a legendary NCAA tournament run for the Florida Gators. Florida does not win the national championship without Walter Clayton Jr. saving the Gators time and time again. This is someone who is not just a really good shot maker, but a versatile shot maker who can make shots on dribble jumpers, on pull-ups, on screens. Just a number of different ways that he can score. I think there's some appeal here too with his playmaking ability. Showed that at Florida this last season. This is a guy who played football in high school, was actually a high major football prospect. Just an elite athlete, an elite competitor. I think at number 13, this would make a lot of sense for an Atlanta Hawks team that is still trying to put some pieces together around Trae Young in the backcourt.
Finishing out the lottery at 14 with the San Antonio Spurs, who are the only team with multiple lottery picks. Fink, you had them taking at number 2, Dylan Harper. Who are you going with at 14?
Going with Liam McNeely. This is a prospect that I've had in the lottery for the entire season. He's dropped on some boards, but I don't think that is appropriate. I think this is a guy who had a tremendous rookie season at UConn, and he did it while playing through both illness and injury, a major sprained ankle, and then what was not reported, he was playing through pneumonia at one point late in the season. He came into the combine, he measured an inch bigger than expected. He grew an inch this year at UConn. And if you're San Antonio, what you need more than anything is floor spacing around Wemby, around De'Aaron Fox, around Steph Castle, and now around Dylan Harper. Liam McNeely gives you that, and he gives you that with the basketball IQ, and he gives you that with toughness and wing size. So this would make a lot of sense to me to close out the lottery.
Okay, so again, Spurs the only team with multiple lottery picks, but the Nets have a bunch more picks to come. They have 4 picks in the first round. Only one center off the board so far. It's Malawach out of Duke, going number 9 to the Raptors, and Liam McNeely to the Spurs, the most recent at 14. Who is the other center, James? Derek Queen also listed as a center who went early in this mock, I think 8th overall to the Brooklyn Nets. All right, up next, a lot more to get to, including the Thunder and Timberwolves getting ready to square off in the Western Conference Finals. They have 2 of the next 3 picks. Just about reaching the halfway point of Adam Finkelstein's latest first-round mock with the NBA draft. About 5 weeks away. Kyle Boone is with us as well. I'm Chris Hassel. We're going to ping-pong back and forth again. Kyle, I'm going to go to you on this pick from Fink. At 15, the Thunder taking a guy that might end up being one of the oldest players on their team next season if this happens. Neat Clifford, who is 23 and played 5 years of college basketball.
Yeah, that's right. Neat Clifford, one of the older prospects in this class. And, the Oklahoma City Thunder have advanced to the Western Conference Finals despite its shooting, certainly not because of it. I know if you watched the NBA playoffs, you would realize that. And Neat Clifford, a guy who I think is a versatile scorer, would make a lot of sense for a team that is still competing at a high level for the NBA championship. Can score it in every way, playmaking upside, made 37.7% of his threes last season at Colorado State, and that was in a high usage role. I think he would make a lot of sense as a complementary piece as they continue to build that backcourt around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, around Jalen Williams. Neat Clifford, someone who's a little bit older, obviously, but it makes sense as a plug-and-play type prospect in this year's draft class.
And the Thunder have another pick coming up at 24 as well. Let's hit number 16. It's the Orlando Magic, and Fink, it's the son of Jason Richardson, Jace, who measured a little bit shorter at the Combine this past week.
Yeah, he was listed at 6'3" this year at Michigan State, but whoops, it was 6 feet and 1/2 inches this week at the Combine, and that is not irrelevant. In fact, I talked to a number of NBA scouts who were disappointed with that, and in particular, they weren't sure they were going to be able to sell their bosses on potentially as high as they otherwise would have. But Orlando is a place that is still looking for depth and stability in the backcourt. Obviously, Jalen Suggs has emerged into a key piece of their future. Richardson is viewed as a versatile and high IQ player. He had really efficient numbers coupled with the ability to score at multiple levels this year at Michigan State. That's not something you see for a young guard, and he is credited for having a very high basketball IQ. So the Southpaw, I think, is a very real option for Orlando at 16, regardless of the fact that he is not as big as we hoped he might be during his freshman season.
All right, let's get to the Minnesota Timberwolves at 17. We had the Thunder at 15. Those two teams getting ready to play in the Western Conference Finals. And it's Asa Newell out of Georgia, the pick for Adam Finkelstein here. Kyle, he references that both Reed and Randall, a couple guys that play similar positions, have player options this summer. You buying this?
I do, and I think there's a lot of value, particularly in this spot in the draft, in looking at bigs. Asa Newell's on the board here. You've got Danny Wolf here. Joan Berenger from France would make a lot of sense. Thomas Sorber. Newell's a guy who I think is plug and play. And for the Minnesota Timberwolves going to the Western Conference Finals, they may be prioritizing something like that. And the archetype of someone who is a high energy big, an above the rim finisher, can block shots at a really high level. Newell checks a lot of boxes. Good size, I think good energy, someone who can make a lot of sense for a team that is trying to get cheaper in their front court, someone who I think could be an early contributor just because of the archetype of this type of big man that we've seen coming from college to the NBA ranks.
Kyle mentioned Danny Wolf out of Michigan, and he falls to number 18 and the Washington Wizards. Adam, I wanted to read a quote from Kyle from his latest piece. He calls Wolf, quote, funky and functional.
I love it. Listen, I've known Danny Wolf since he was in high school. In fact, I bumped into him in the elevator last week in Chicago, and I think he would embrace funky and functional. Danny is he's another one. He's not 7 feet tall, even though he was listed at that, but he's just under that, and he is highly skilled for his size. He is a fantastic playmaker, and by that I mean a dribbler and a passer. At 6'11", he's someone that you can run your offense through, and that's what Michigan did all season long. Now, you go back to what Washington is doing, when we talked about this earlier in the lottery. They are accumulating young assets and letting them play through their mistakes. They've got Alex Sarr there, who is a defensive monster, a playmaker, but not really a shooter. I think that Wolf, with his touch, if he can evolve into that floor spacer, if that shooting can catch up with his ability to handle and pass, it would turn into a nice front court tandem down there for Washington. And that's not to say he's necessarily a starter, but just that it would be another compatible piece as they build up their front court of the future.
Yeah, that was the second pick for the Wizards. You had Yakachunas coming out of Illinois there, going to the Wizards at 6th overall. No international players to this point. That's rare. Usually we get at least one, usually two, maybe three in the top 10. But at number 19, the Nets with their second pick, Fink has them going with Nolan Traore out of France. Kyle?
Yeah, and this is the second pick for the Brooklyn Nets in this mock draft. They'd selected Derek Queen, a center, earlier in this draft. And I think Nolan Traore is a guy who started the year as a potential top 5 guy in this draft. His stock tailed off a little bit, but he's playing at a really high level overseas right now. Big body point guard, makes smart decisions. He can get downhill and create paint touches. I really like his size, his energy. Developing shooter. I think that's something he's going to continue to have to work on. Gaining confidence right now in France. And yeah, some France prospects we've seen over the last couple years made the transition from international play to the NBA level and done it at a really high level. Victor Wembanyama among them. So Traore, I think, would be a really big swing for the Brooklyn Nets, who have a number of swings in this first round.
And the first of several international players in the next handful of picks, including the Nets, who have 2 more picks in the 20s. And as we take a recap of our 15 through 19 here, we see Danny Wolf going to the Wizards at 18. Jace Richardson, the son of Jason Richardson, the great dunker from Michigan State, at 16 to the Magic, but he's fallen a little bit because he's gotten shorter since his days at Michigan State, from 6'3" down to just over 6 feet. Some interesting potential selections in the 20s, including players still deciding whether or not to stay in college, and a would-be Duke player potentially playing his way into the top 20. Mock Draft Monday is continuing here on HQ Spotlight. I'm Chris Hassel, joined by Adam Finkelstein and Kyle Boone. Fink has a brand new mock draft for us at CBSSports.com. We're into the 20s now. This is where things get really interesting, and players with interesting backstories and really question marks about their immediate future. And we start here at 20 with the Miami Heat. What do you have them doing here, Fink?
Well, they're going to go with Cedric Coward, who I think was the big winner of last week's NBA Draft Combine. He was committed to Duke out of the transfer portal. He went to Washington State, only played 6 games last year before injury, but he put up big numbers. And then last week, he just had tremendous measurements. Now, what we've learned since is that the positive reinforcement actually began before the Combine. He did some private workouts for some teams, got excellent feedback, and so the momentum was already moving towards him staying in the draft long before he got to Chicago, but now it appears to be solidified.
First and only pick for the Heat in the first round. The Jazz have the 5th and the 21st picks. At 5, Fink had him taking Trey Johnson out of Texas. Kyle, what do you think about, is it Joan Beringer out of France? Another France prospect here at 21.
That's it, Beringer. You got to really, Beringer. Joan Beringer from France. A big man for the Utah Jazz. And I like this pick for Utah. This is their 2nd pick in the first round. Only 18 years old. This is the long game for the Utah Jazz. They're not going to turn things around in 1 year. Maybe they do that. They get Cooper Flagg. It's not the case. They're picking at 5 and 21. Beringer's someone, I think with the wing scoring that they added in Trey Johnson earlier in this mock draft, Beringer's someone who I think could feel a need for them in that front court. They could build around long term. Maybe not ready next year, but someone who I think could be a development prospect who in a couple years could pay off in a big way for this team.
All right, let's move to the Atlanta Hawks at 22. Fink, you had him taking Walter Clayton Jr. at 13. How about here in the 20s?
They're going to go with Thomas Sorber, who is another player coming off the combine with a lot of momentum. Sorber measured 6'10" with a 7'6" wingspan. The Georgetown freshman exceeded all expectations last year, even though he did not finish the season. Had a foot injury that initially we thought might send him back to college, but now the intel is saying that he will head to the draft. I think there's a chance that Atlanta considers him at 13. They're one of the teams believed to be really, really interested in him, but at 22, I think they would have a hard time passing him twice.
The Indiana Pacers are up at 23. They had a man by the name of Rick Smits who starred for them back in the 90s, the dunking Dutchman. But here, it's Fink going with the 3rd Frenchman in the last 5 picks, Kyle.
Dunking Dutchman, yeah, I love that. We're going to go with Noah Asengu from France, and this is a guy who I think is one of the many wild cards in this year's draft. Could end up crashing the lottery. He's still playing right now overseas for Ulm, and he's doing a really good job of that. Meanwhile, prospects are doing, the standard pre-draft measurements, the interviews, the workouts with teams, and projectable high release. He's got a really big frame. I think there's a high ceiling for this prospect, and I think at this range in the draft, you're looking to take big swings. Asengu, I think, would make a lot of sense for the Indiana Pacers, who are in the Eastern Conference Finals at pick number 23 here.
Adam didn't have a single international player in the lottery, even the top 18, I believe. But here we are with the Thunder at 24, Fink, and you have the 4th international player in the last 6 picks.
Yeah, Ben Seraph, a jumbo 6'6" creative guard, maybe the best live dribble passer in the draft. Now, this is going to be interesting for OKC because, frankly, they just don't have enough spots. They've got too many picks. They've got too many players, too many young assets. They drafted Nikola Taupic last year. He missed the season with injury. Seraph is a similar archetype, but I do believe he's the best player on the board here. So if you're Sam Presti, you just keep accumulating assets and you find somewhere to put them, whether you keep them in Europe or you put them on the injured reserve list. And eventually you think he either has to punt them down the field for future picks or have a consolidation trade. But heck, he's already got 3 of the best players in the NBA. So these are all good problems to have.
Seraph joining Nick Clifford in this latest mock draft, who went 15th overall to OKC. As you look at the last few picks, 3 of these teams, Thunder, Hawks, Jazz, all adding a 2nd player to their respective first-round hauls. The Nets still have 2 more picks. They're back-to-back at 26 and 27 coming up. Wrapping up our latest mock draft from Adam Finkelstein here on CBS Sports HQ Spotlight. I'm Chris Hassel, also joined by Kyle Boone, who has his own mock at CBSSports.com. Kyle, what do you think of the Magic at 25 taking Rasheer Fleming, according to Fink?
I love it. I think this is really good value. Rasheer Fleming, someone who I have a top 20 prospect grade on in this year's draft class. Don't think he's a star, but I think this is someone who was productive in college and could be a star in his own role at the NBA level. Big-bodied wing, who can effectively space the floor, can be a really good role player at the NBA level. Orlando's trying to add pieces right around Paolo Banchero, the former #1 pick. Need to add some oomph to its offense. I think Rasheer Fleming, the two-way ability that he could add, the depth that he could add on the wing because of his defense, because of his length, because of his shooting, make a lot of sense here at number 25 for the Orlando Magic.
The Nets have already had a couple of picks in this mock, and now they go back-to-back here, Kyle, beginning with Yegor Demin out of BYU.
Yeah, Demin at number 26 in this draft is the big surprise here. I'm shocked that he would fall out of the lottery, much less to the 20s. And I'm sure Fink will have more on that. But yeah, this is someone who I think it shows maybe the volatility of his draft stock right now. There's a lot of teams that really like him. There's some teams that may be looking elsewhere. There's definitely some holes in his game that I think could end up pushing him later in this draft. But no question, when you look at the strengths of his game, he's one of the best passers in this draft. He has great size. He plays with really good pacing, and I think you can put the ball in his hands. You can trust him to make good decisions running your offense. There's a lot to like here with Yegor Demin, measured just over 6'8" at the combine. You know, someone who I think is a gigantic point guard with great passing ability. There's a lot to like here with Yegor Demin from BYU.
Yeah, listen, guys, I deserve this. You know, it's more social media hate. It's just on live TV, so it's cool. I think 26 would be a slip for Yegor, to be sure. He's probably the best passer in the draft. Like Kyle said, over 6'8". That's without shoes. So functionally, he's 6'10". I don't think he's guarding point guards. Frankly, I don't think he can guard Boone. And that's why I think he could potentially slip. He's a polarizing prospect. Some people would have him in the top 10. Others would have him at 26. It's going to be an interesting one to watch for sure.
And right after that, Fink has the Nets taking Ryan Kalkbrenner, the longtime Creighton Blue Jay. Kyle, what do you think of this?
This is good value here. You know, we've all seen Ryan Kalkbrenner star at the college level for Creighton. He was a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year in the Big East. Very productive at the college level, 7-footer who can own the game on that end of the floor. You know, I don't think this is a guy who is going to be a star, but the Brooklyn Nets, who have 4 first-round picks right now in this year's draft class, could add someone who I think has a really high floor, could be a potential starter at the NBA level, can space the floor, can block shots. Ryan Kalkbrenner at number 27 for the Brooklyn Nets makes a lot of sense.
And there you see the 4-player haul for Brooklyn. Now, they might trade some of these or package some of these, but as of right now, 4 first-round picks. And again, this draft is at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Let's move to the Boston Celtics at 28. Fink, it's a program that has question marks about the future because there's major injury concerns and they're getting a little bit older and they fell short of expectations this season. This is actually one that you and Kyle agree on. I think the only pick outside of the top 5 that you agree on.
Yeah, nobody likes that. It's much more fun when Boone can call me stupid. LeBaron Fineland is hyper-competitive, exceeded all expectations this year at Alabama. He can play make. He's got pretty good size for a lead guard. He was their best defensive player this year. Not necessarily the three-point shooter that the Celtics typically covet, but I think from a temperament perspective, I think he could really fit Joe Mazzulla and just give him a little bit more rim pressure, which I think is something they might have lacked at the guard spot late in the season. The
Celtics' questions about the future, very relative when you look at some of the other teams, including the Phoenix Suns, who don't come up until number 29, and it's Will Riley out of Illinois, the pick for Fink. Kyle?
Yeah, and I think for the Phoenix Suns, right, they're in a spot where they maybe have a chance to make some big swings in this part of the draft. I think Will Riley is one of the bigger swings you could make. Very toolsy prospect, someone who has really good size, showed some flashes of potential stardom with his scoring ability, had 6 games as a true freshman at Illinois this season of 20 or more points per game. He actually reclassified late, so still a very young prospect. I think there's a lot of intrigue surrounding Will Riley. He ends up coming back to college, would make sense as someone who ends up, playing his way into being a top 20 prospect. Not someone who maybe contributes right away, but long-term you're thinking for the Phoenix Suns, this guy could end up being someone who becomes a part of your rotation love that value, love that fit for Will Riley and the Phoenix Suns.
Still have about 4 weeks to decide on whether or not these players at the back end of the first round are going to opt in or opt out of the NBA draft and go back to college. They have 10 days before the draft to do that. June 15th is the deadline. One more pick. It's the Clippers. Fink, how do you have them finishing up night one?
Well, I've got him with Tahad Pettiford, and this is a pick that we had even before the Combine, but Pettiford certainly helped himself in Chicago because he showed the playmaking ability, the shot making, and the dexterity. I mean, this guy's literally ambidextrous. He shoots a basketball left hand, he writes right-handed, he dunks with both, and he showed it at the Combine. It's going to be an interesting case, though, because he's going to want, I would think, a first-round promise to stay in this draft because there is a significant NIL payday coming for him if he returns to college basketball. So no doubt he helped himself. He's got a chance to be a first-round pick, but if I'm in his camp, I want a promise. Otherwise, I am headed back to college.
All right, that is the full first-round mock from Adam Finkelstein here with us on CBS Sports HQ Spotlight. We have several experts doing first-round mocks post-lottery on the site that you can check out right now, including Kyle, but this is how things finished up with the Nets adding Yegor Demin and Ryan Kalkbrenner to their group of 4 players in this draft, including Derek Queen and Nolan Traore. All right, we're going to recap things, get the biggest takeaways from the fellas, with Cooper Flagg going number 1 to the Mavs. That's next here on HQ Spotlight. Back on CBS Sports HQ Spotlight, Chris Hassel joined by Adam Finkelstein and Kyle Boone. We just went through Finkelstein's latest mock draft with about 5 weeks to go until the draft. The first Mock Monday here on HQ Spotlight, where we have the actual lottery order. Fink, this was the first one you filled out since then as well. So what were your biggest takeaways the first time doing this, especially post-draft combine in Chicago that you were at?
Well, I think for me, there's 2 things. First, I would start with the top 5, which I think is pretty well solidified. Cooper Flagg, we all know, is in a class by himself. Dylan Harper, you could say he's in a separate tier by himself as well. Although to me, Ace Bailey is firmly in that mix. VJ Edgecombe and Trey Johnson. I think these are clearly the top 5 players in this draft. Now, listen, there's different opinions on this. I've got Con Kneppel 6 on my board. You could certainly make the argument it's a big 6. Whether it's 5 or 6, to me, that is the top tier or section of this draft. And it's going to be very interesting once you get beyond that. What is also interesting to me, those 5 players you just saw, they were also the 5 best prospects coming into college basketball a year ago. So initially the top 5 recruits, now the top 5 draft picks. It's a testament to their ability to continue to take their game to new levels and not get caught in all the hype, which is an accomplishment in and of itself in this day and age.
And the same 5 in the same order to the same teams that Kyle has in his latest mock draft as well. What was your biggest takeaway from Fink's mock?
Yeah, 2 things I think with Fink's mock draft that I noticed here. One is this is clearly the year of the one and done. We've had number 1 picks each of the last 2 years from the international waters come over and be the number 1 pick. That is not going to be the case this year. Cooper Flagg going to be the number 1 pick from Duke. The top 11 prospects in his latest mock actually are one and done players before we get to players who played more than 1 year in college or from the international way. And also the second commendation that I noticed here with Fink's mock is that Jeremiah Fears and Yegor Demin both at just outside the top 10 and at number 26 in this mock. Guys who I think are end up later in this draft because there's some questions about their shooting ability. A lot of volatility in both their guys' stock. I'm going to have them higher in my latest mock draft coming out later next week.
All right, looking forward to it. Kyle Boone and Adam Finkelstein with us here on HQ Spotlight. They also do a mock on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. You mentioned those one and dones. 19 of the 30 picks were one and dones today in Fink's mock.